Hey, what's up guys? This is Anthony from Anthony's Customs, and for this review, we are looking at the new Marvel Legends Beast figure, which is part of the Caliban Build-A-Figure wave of Marvel Legends. And this is another one, just like Gambit, that people have wanted since the beginning. The first Beast figure was good for its time. It actually aged a little bit better than the Gambit figure, I think, but it was definitely in need of a replacement. And finally, we got one. When they showed it off, it looked like it was going to have some issues. Most of those issues aren't actually here in the final release, so that's really good. There are a couple of things which are probably going to grind your gears, though. A lot to like, though, about this guy, so let's go ahead and get him off the stand and take a closer look. This guy stands just shy of 18 centimeters, which makes him just about 7 inches. So he's definitely got some size to him, which is appropriate for the character. I'm not going to do a comparison against the original, guys. There's no point. This one is better than the original overall by far. Okay, there's no point in comparing it. Plus, it's buried in my moving pile of stuff, and I don't know where it is, but there's no point. So anyway, this figure, let's talk about it. Aesthetics first. It's sculpted really well mostly. The entire body, with the exception of one glaring issue, I'll show you in a second, has fur on it. That's fantastic. They could have easily only done patches like they have on other releases, and that would have been acceptable by typical Hasbro standards. This guy is covered in fur. Even the spots where there's barely any fur, like on his boobages, there's fur. It looks good in terms of the sculpt. That's fantastic. How did they accentuate that sculpt with the paint? They didn't. They took a big fat shit on it with this airbrushed grayish black. So he's just got spots of black on his shoulder, on his hand, on the back of his arms, the center of his back, and then on the sides of his legs and tops of his feet. It looks ridiculous. It's terrible. Beast does not ever look like that. Sometimes they draw the particularly hairy spots darker, but not just with airbrush poofs of grayish black and down the center of his chest. It looks like fresh ass. It's not good at all. It's terrible. A wash on this figure, they sculpted, they put the detail in the sculpt. A dark blue wash or even a black wash would have made this thing look gorgeous. It would have looked like a high-end piece. The sculpt is fantastic. They put the effort into the sculpt, and then instead of making the sculpt look even better with paint, they pooped all over it. How do you make decisions like that? It's just lazy. And then look what they did for the head. They actually did the top part of the head very nicely. They made the hair darker and put blue dry brushing on top of it, and it looks great. The hair part on the head looks really, really good. But then we get to the other part that's a problem. The sculpt on the face is so incredibly flat, and I mean that planer-like the entire face is pinched in, and also there's like no detail sculpt on his face. It looks weird. He's got his mouth like wide open, like he's roaring or yelling, and there's no wrinkling in his face, there's no nothing. It's really, really weird. We have a slightly furrowed brow, but like the lines are like the laugh lines, so to speak, around his mouth, there's nothing there. The nose is really lacking detail. So the face is not a great situation. It's also the wrong blue. His face is a different blue from every other part of his body. So definitely a bummer. Here's the thing though, guys. The good news is it's a lot easier to repaint a figure, and I don't ever talk about this because that's not relevant to the review generally speaking. But in this case, I'm going to point it out to you guys. The sculpt is there for the most part. Face could be a little better, but overall the sculpt is great on this guy. So if you were so inclined to just cover this guy in blue, which wouldn't be very difficult, and then do some dry brushing or even a wash, you could really make this figure look great. So at least there's a bright side to it. But, oh, and they did a decent job with the belt. So aesthetics on this guy, it would have been like a 10 out of 10 if they had just worked with their own good sculpt. But instead they pooped on it, so it's only going to get a 7 out of 10. How do they? Oh man, it's so frustrating. Like, this was so close to being the best Marvel Legends they've released in like a decade, and then they did that with the paint. What the heck? Okay, time for accessories. We have one gripping hand that comes on him in the package on the right side, and then on the left side we have this hand, which is like arthritis hand. I don't know what this is. Why is his thumb like in his palm? That doesn't look like he's swiping at somebody. That doesn't look like he's holding something. Doesn't look like he's just doing like a heroic clenchy type open hand thing. He's got his thumb in his palm, so you can't use that hand for anything, so that's a waste. Then we get a completely flat open hand to replace the left side, which is good for like a handstand type pose, so that's fine. And then we get a fist hand on the right side, so that's fine. But that's going to limit posability quite a bit because this arthritis hand is almost always going to be there unless you have him doing a handstand. So the good news is you could have him doing a handstand and then maybe do like a clenchy fist or something. So I guess that's okay. So accessory wise, 5 out of 10, 2 interchangeable hands, but one of the 4 hands is his good hand. You won't get that reference. All right, time for the articulation. This is new in the torso. We're going to get to it, though. The head is on what you would normally see on a Marvel Legends figure. We have the hinge, and we have the ball peg, and it works well enough. You could make the argument he needs more neck, but since it's Beast, I'm not going to worry about it. It's okay. Rotation's a little awkward, but it'll do. It's fine. So we have these really nice butterfly joints that don't go very far forward. They do go really far back, which is probably more than you ever need them to go. But it's there and it works really well. And there's some instances where you might want to use it, and they did a good job. It's awesome. Well, oh, here, you know what? Let me point this out. One of the things that makes this sculpt so good, and I talked about this on the Hercules figure, which may or may not have been published by the time you see this review. The shoulders are farther back from the neck. Shoulders are back here, neck's in front, looks fantastic. There's actually some width or depth to his pectorals and his back. Most of their figures don't have that, and it makes them all look scrawny. This guy's got a girthy torso, and it looks so good. And they implemented the butterfly joint very nicely. Even though it doesn't go very far forward, it does exist. It does work forward some, into the back a lot. Very nicely executed, especially with a girthy torso. I'm going to try to say girthy as many times as I can. Shoulders work nicely, pretty much horizontal, full rotation of course. Bicep swivel is fine. Double jointed elbow works fantastic. It's fantastically. Extra bulky guy, perfectly executed double jointed elbow. You know they can do it. Now anytime they don't have an excuse. Backside's really ugly though. They probably could have thought a little bit more about that, but it'll do. It'll be okay. And of course the wrists have a swivel and a hinge. I believe they all have a standard horizontal hinge. Yes, they do. All right, onto the torso. I was really hoping that this diaphragm joint was going to have all that articulation that we see sometimes. We saw it on some of the Build-A-Figures recently, and a couple, I guess, who had Ebony Maw had one. Really nice diaphragm joint. It's just a little bit. You don't get a ton of range out of this at all. It's mostly a swivel. You do get a little bit of leaning out of it, but it's not one of their like crazy good ones. It's good, but it's not crazy good. But they did add this reverse ab crunch in here to combine it with, and I guess that's pretty good. Typically speaking, a reverse ab crunch is very hard to pull off. I guess I don't need to get into the technical side of it, but it often looks goofy and doesn't work very well. But on this one, it works well enough, and it doesn't look goofy at all. Probably because he's so thick and girthy. But combine these two joints, and you have pretty good range. The only problem is, you don't have a waist twist on this guy. So you end up having that 12-inch Spider-Man syndrome where you lean him forward and then you rotate him around like a helicopter rather than being able to actually rotate him and lean him. So like you can't lean him towards the side at all. That's another one of the big problems of the reverse ab crunch. You often lose your waist twist completely, and so that limits posability significantly. So like if you wanted to lean him this way, you can't do it. You cannot lean him to the side, and that sucks a lot. We do have a floating belt, and now for the hips. Pretty interesting thing for the hips. I feel like they kind of over-engineered it because it's not really necessary, but I'll show you. So you can bring the legs pretty much all the way forward. The knee stays bent a little bit, but you can bring the leg pretty much forward. They added a drop-down mechanism to bring them up almost none. Like it doesn't really help anything. It doesn't hurt anything. You can see the difference there. It's like maybe a millimeter. There's almost no change. There's a little bit of change, but it doesn't really help that much. So, I mean, it's fine. Like I said, there's no harm, no foul, so it's fine. It's just interesting that they went through the effort of that, but it doesn't really increase anything. Like, you still have the range. Because if you do it right, you don't need to do that in the first place, and they did it right, and added that. So it's just weird. It's Hasbro, it's gonna Hasbro. But again, there's no problem with it, so that's okay. So you have your thigh swivel, which is fine. Double jointed knees, which work really nicely. And then for the feet, they really buried the ankle down into the foot, which works nicely on Beast. So you can bring the foot all the way back and pretty far forward. And you get a toe hinge, which is good enough. So, and they did the other thing that I really like, which all companies should do. They made the hinge the same thickness as the foot. That way when you bend it, you don't have any weird gouging or anything at the bottom of the foot. So it's just a natural bend, so that's really, really nice. So as you guys can see, this figure is really good. The articulation on it, though the torso, I don't like that combination, though this isn't the worst example of it. You can see by not being able to lean him to the side or rotate the lower torso, it's definitely going to hinder him. But otherwise, everything's pretty good on this guy. So 8 out of 10 for the articulation. I don't like this. I like the idea of what they're doing, but they need to stick with a regular ab crunch if they're going to stick it in there, and a waist twist. Otherwise, just give us a really good diaphragm joint and that solves all the problems. Adding this in here overcomplicates things and doesn't help the posability, so that's a problem. So yeah, okay, time for the final verdict on this guy. If they didn't screw up the paint job on it, even with the soft sculpt on the face and the glossy face and the face being a different blue, I'd give this guy like a 9.5 out of 10. From Hasbro, this thing is like, it's top notch. It's the balls. It's everything you would want out of a Beast figure from Hasbro. But they went and put their stupid ass paint on there, and then of course they screwed this up too, but I already mentioned that. So I'm gonna give it only an 8 out of 10. The paint knocks it back. Again, it's just paint. I might even try to go at it with like some paint remover and see what I can do, but it's a really, really strong release. Easily top 10 from Hasbro this year, top 10 Marvel Legends. At least from everything they've released so far. This makes everything else look bad, but it's a really, really strong release, and I've talked about it a lot because there's a lot to talk about, so hopefully you guys appreciate this longer video. So if you made it this far in the video, let me know by saying his crotch works better than I thought it would, because I thought his crotch was going to be a problem, but it works out pretty well with these hips, so it's pretty good. Anyways, guys, they really screwed it up with this paint. It's so disappointing. Okay, it's a good release. I talked about it enough. You guys got enough information to make your buying decision, though I can't imagine anybody's not going to buy it. So please go buy it. You're going to enjoy it, and I will see you guys in the next video. If you like this one, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, you should do that because I have new videos up almost every single day and thousands of videos already for you to look at on my channel. So make sure you do all that and come back. And in the meantime, keep collecting.